Thanks for downloading a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online. Now stay tuned for your 3CR podcast.
But you also had people that were very fine people. Very fine people on both sides.
And the aliens with mind meld and give them the technology. They're bad aliens. So are you surprised the Nazis were influenced by demons?
No, if demons are real, I would definitely think they'd be on the side of the Nazis.
Yeah.
McDonald's is connected to the Clintons. They chop up the bodies and put them into the sausage and hamburgers. People are being cannibalized. Look it up.
And I'm watching CNN talk about this as violent white nationalist protests. We have done everything in our power to keep this peaceful, you know?
It's Pepe's become kind of a symbol.
Welcome to Yeah Nah Pasaran, a show about fascism and its gravediggers. I'm Cam Smith.
I'm Andy Fleming.
And this week we are joined by academic Dr Kaz Ross. Thanks for joining us, Kaz.
Hello, comrades.
Now, Kaz, just to begin with, what have you done to the sub-editors at The Age? Because I want to ask you about an article that was published under your name with an all-time classic stitch-up headline. The headline is Stupid, Deluded, Uneducated. Why ordinary people get hooked on conspiracy theories? Is it because they're stupid, deluded and uneducated that they get hooked on these theories?
Well, yes, I argue quite the opposite, in fact, and that if we think of them as stupid, deluded, uneducated, we miss the point and we have no way into helping them as well.
Well, that's why they put the question marks in the headline.
They did. That's a lot of work.
Questions.
It's a lot of work for a punctuation mark, isn't it, to be doing? But yes, I didn't argue that people were stupid and deluded, although, of course, probably some of them are. But I argue that we really have to delve into what function conspiracies serve, how conspiracies are spread around the place, how people think they're doing the right thing by sharing conspiracies. And sometimes conspiracies are actually true. That's the other thing. Unfortunately, a lot of the conspiracy theories that we saw during the COVID era were wacky and wild and pretty well out there. So I think my favourite was the Melbourne lockdowns were because the Chinese-made 5G technology was being brought in at night by Daniel Andrews, and that he was taking the mole children from the tunnels and shifting them around in the night. That's a pretty wacky theory.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous because why would they move the mole children? They're happy where they are underground.
Yeah, they were happy where they were, but I see that probably to this day, actually, some people like Ricardo Bossi are still rescuing mole children, I imagine. And don't forget the tunnels supposedly went all the way to Uluru. So if they're packed full of mole children, that's a lot of kids there that got to be rescued.
Yeah, I think if there was a tunnel going all the way to Uluru, we might have noticed it given the disruption that the much smaller tunnels that they're building create.
Well, Melbourne does have tunnel fever, right? Aren't you being subjected to a lot of tunnel digging these days?
Yes, we are. But apparently, allegedly, that's for the purpose of public transportation.
Not mole children.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a little...
Yeah, well, I think that one of the things I tried to argue in my piece was that you brought up to believe in the tooth fairy or Father Christmas, or people believe in angels and ghosts. So people can convince themselves of all sorts of wacky things, despite the fact that there's no evidence to support their beliefs. In fact, there might even be evidence to the contrary. Don't really find the evidence that the earth is flat to be particularly compelling.
If that's the case, what is it about these ideas or these claims that others sometimes find affirming? Because when I think of the tooth fairy, when I think of Santa Claus, they're good things. They bring certain things to a person who behaves well, whereas I think much of the other discussion about these nefarious forces is those are the forces of evil. They're the ones who have been given agency in these kinds of discussions. So what is it that you think that's appealing, I guess, if it's not derived from necessarily a lack of intelligence or inquiry? What makes these theories and these claims compelling, do you think?
I think there's three elements to that. The first is it creates a community. So there's a bunch of people and they're all doing their own research, aka looking at YouTube clips, looking for evidence here and there. Oh, look, all those leaders are wearing red shoes. That must mean something. So it's kind of a quest. You're all on a quest together. So it does form a sense of community. And when you're uncertain about things or you're scared about things, sometimes the conspiracy can actually give you some comfort. It's not just global warming is completely out of control and we're all doomed. It's like, no, it's a conspiracy because whoever they are, and this is where I'd argue most conspiracies are anti-Semitic, but they, the ones in control, they're doing this on purpose and they're on purpose spreading all this misinformation to control us. So somehow the idea that nefarious baddies in control of the world, that's less terrifying than, hey, guess what? No one's in control and the world's going to hell in a handbasket. So I think that that's one of the functions that conspiracies can give you, a sense of order in the world. Just think about QAnon and everybody being obsessed about the deep state and Trump is going to deal with the deep state and he's playing 5G chess and all this sort of thing. It's kind of a belief in some authoritarian daddy figure that knows all and is dealing with the forces of evil on your behalf. And I think it reinforces this idea also that you're a bit of a hero in the story because everybody else is asleep and they need to wake up, but we are the ones with the truth. Like a Hollywood movie, you're the one with the truth and you and your plucky band of heroes and heroines are going to save the day in the end because you are the ones that say, I told you so. We always knew that it was the mole children or whatever it is. So I think there's a lot of psychological and social functions to be had by conspiracies. And certainly with the way that social media is, these things just spread like crazy. So, for example, one of my favorite examples is the salt crisis of China, where after the tsunami in Japan and the flooding of Fukushima, there was a cloud of radiation and it was heading from Japan towards China. And people went, oh no, we need to get iodine in our diets because that will protect us from radiation. And so there was panic buying of salt and people bought sacks and sacks of salt, like 300 lifetimes worth of salt, because they wanted to consume it for the iodine. And at the time at the university where I was teaching, I had students whose parents were contacting them, say, send salt, we need salt. Now, the amount of salt you'd need to eat to get any benefit from the iodine, you would be dead. So salt all sold out in less than 12 hours, and the government was trying to calm it all down. And this is another element of conspiracies. The more the government says there isn't a conspiracy here, the more people believe there is a conspiracy there, particularly if it's an authoritarian government in control of the media. So whenever the government denied that there was a conspiracy, people went, that's it, proven it, there's a conspiracy there. And so people were very committed to their salt conspiracy. And it took some time for them to realise that they now had many lifetimes worth of salt stockpiled in their kitchens and people were trying to take it back to the shops and it was all a big disaster.
Salt doesn't go off, it's fine.
Yeah, but are you going to really leave a few sacks of salt to your descendants? Is it going to be like in 5 generations' time, gee, we're still using great-great-great-grandma's salt?
Yeah, it's probably not good for the industry.
It's not good for the industry, and let's face it, you've got small apartments in China. You can't really afford to stash that much salt. It's not like gold bars or something. So the Chinese government has been on to this conspiracy thing for many, many years, and they brought in a whole lot of rules about gossiping online. And if you share something and it's shared by more than so many people, 50 people or something, you can be liable. So they actively censor the internet and then they get people to self-censor because if something goes viral, you could be really in for it. And of course, all of that censoring just makes people more conspiratorial, right? What's the government covering up? But they've been on top of the conspiracy sharing tendencies of social media for a very long time.
In the article you wrote that was published in The Age, you also observed that the Melbourne-based movement was dominated by people who had never considered themselves political activists before. And I was wondering if you could comment a little more about the fact that a whole range of people who were not politically engaged suddenly found themselves on the front line, so to speak.
I think that was one of the most interesting things about that movement, that the leaders that rose up were just grassroots people who'd never done anything before. They weren't big influencers. They weren't necessarily YouTubers. They weren't doing multi-level marketing, any of that sort of stuff. They were just normal everyday people going, hey, this COVID thing and these lockdowns, like, what is going on? I'm really scared and worried. I've lost my job. My family's lost their jobs. We're stuck in the house. What's all this about? And they kind of found each other. And as a result, the first months of the movement were really diverse, religious-wise, ethnicity-wise, age-wise. It wasn't just a bunch of white people. There were heaps and heaps and heaps of people from different ethnic backgrounds who'd never done anything before. And then suddenly there was this great campaign to smash your television. And so you had all these just people filming themselves, like burning newspapers, smashing televisions, pretending to smash televisions. And it's everybody from your old grandma types to young people it was crazy. It was a crazy time. But it was a genuine grassroots movement. There was no ideological sharing. There was no shared point between all those people. It was just, we can't understand what's going on. And they found comfort and solace in being with each other. And then out of that rose, the first leader was Thanos Panayides. And his own particular wondering about what is all this about, and is it to do with religion, and what's the state doing? He was the first sort of protest leader actually in the COVID era.
And what's become of Thanos?
That's a really good question. I think he got really burnt out, and like a lot of those early leaders, I mean, he was in the first set of leaders, and then there were other ones that rose up who had cut their teeth on multi-level marketing, doTERRA essential oils or some other sorts of schemes, and that the grifters moved in basically. But a lot of those original people were very smashed by the state. They really were. The pressure on them from police was great. So in my view, many of them burnt out because of the police pressure. They didn't really have a coherent ideology. They kind of tried to turn it into a personal brand. Then they tried to turn it into kind of a way of making money through their personal brand. That's pretty hard to pull off. So for Thanos himself, I mean, the crowning moment for Thanos was he's holding his first big demo at the steps of Parliament in Melbourne, and he goes to read. He's already had a bit of a go at a speech, and he has another go when he starts to read out about his father always told him that the mark of the beast in the Bible was 666, and he starts to read this out. At precisely that second was when Victoria Police decided to swoop on him. So straight away at the very beginning of this movement was this great conspiracy confirmed, like, wow, we mentioned the name of the beast, the satanic 666, the mark of the beast, and that's vaccinations, and we get stomped by police. So it was sort of hard-baked into the beginning of the movement, I believe. But there's a few sort of knockoff Thanoses around the place. Mostly they're kind of personality types that are trying to build a brand around their personality, whereas Thanos, I believe, he genuinely was trying to form this, what they called the 99%. He decided that he'd get all these people and they threw people power, and it was lovely to watch very naive people think that they can come up against tactical squads of Vic Pol and win, which they didn't. But they were very naive, I think. Over time, of course, the movement's now been whittled down to pretty well a bunch of white Christians. I don't see much ethnic diversity. I don't see much religious diversity. And it's become a very boring kind of pseudo-patriot movement, I think. There has been some debate about has it turned to racism, because a number of them have turned to anti-immigration. So a few different people, some of the Muslims and some people of colour, have really called that out. But on the whole, the movement's just defaulted back to a kind of Reclaim Australia, white patriot kind of movement, I would say, with a bunch of grifting influencers who seem now to be pretty keen on selling some kind of magic water scheme.
Kaz, one question that I was asked a lot by journalists during the height of the pandemic was what can be done? And I mean, firstly, if I'm the person you're coming to for the solution, that's a problem. But my answer was generally, government just needs to be transparent and honest in everything they do, and that would cut out quite a bit of the issue. I don't know why that advice has never been taken, but what do you think needs to be done?
Well, I think that there's a couple of things going on there. One is that Australia has, over the last 20 years, and increasingly so, is a very secretive society politically. This is a country where you can be hauled in and questioned about political matters and you're not allowed to tell anyone. So we do actually live in a society that is, there's a lot of political secrecy. There's a lot of difficulty actually finding out sensitive information from the political parties. We see that secrecy clauses are built into funding agreements, that if you're receiving funding to run some program from the government, you can't criticise the government, your funding's at risk. And recent news has shown that that's only ramping up. So I think that there's not going to be a turn to transparency anytime soon. I can't remember where Australia's ranking now on transparency, but we could be doing a hell of a lot better than we are. So I think that's the first thing. Often you see politicians using words that are just trigger words, absolute trigger words, and people go, whoa, 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 that confirms the conspiracy that I've got in my mind. So there does need to be better advisors, I think, to people who are speaking publicly. But in general, the article that I wrote is part of a book called The Age of Doubt, Building Trust in a World of Misinformation. And it comes on to this question of trust from a lot of different angles. So there isn't a simple solution, I would say. For me, it's about recognising, talking to people who've got conspiracies. It's recognising that they're explaining a complex situation with a theory and trying to sort of unpick what they're trying to understand, what they're trying to explain, what they're actually trying to say. Also, on the whole, I like to think of them as trying to do good. When they're sharing their conspiracy with you, they're trying to save you. Don't get the COVID jab. It's got spike protein. It's got this, it's got that. You're going to be whatever it is. So I do believe the whole disinfecting with sunlight is really important. However, we're in a dire state when it comes to the media transparency, influence, lobby groups, and certainly we just don't have enough neutral media. And then because of the politicisation of organisations like companies like Facebook and Twitter, where do you get neutral news if you're just a normie kind of person and not seeking out news? It's really, really difficult. So I don't have much hope that we're going to combat conspiracies, but I try my best. I like to think the best of people and think that they're telling me this conspiracy because they want to help me. So what is it that they're helping me with? And sometimes I talk to conspiracy theorists and we bond over our hatred of Nazis, for example. And okay, well, I don't agree with everything you're saying on Ukraine or gay issues or trans issues, but I do agree that we both hate Nazis. So let's just focus on that. So I think we're seeing that in America at the moment, where people who think Trump's amazing and they're MAGA 100% are finding, oh, shit, I've just lost my job. And I think the response to them is not, ha, 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 you got what you deserved. It's more like, okay, now we need to show community solidarity and support for these people, and maybe they might change their politicised view of their so-called opponents. I know, what do you two think? How can we deal with conspiracies and conspiracists?
I do think it would possibly mitigate the public's concern over secrecy if governments were more transparent. But as you note, Kaz, that's the trend is in the opposite direction. And there doesn't appear to be too much, and I certainly don't expect the state to become more transparent without real effort by others outside of it. I think, but in terms of the one thing that seems to be a sticking point is, as you said, Kaz, like the appeal of some versions of some kind of conspiracy theory is that it affirms feelings that people have about themselves, their place in the world and how it works, which aren't primarily or easily able to render in a form about which you can have a rational discussion, because much of it is seemingly irrational. And when you're talking about how do you explain things in reference to global warming, a simple explanation might be, well, fossil fuel companies make more profits by exploiting these resources, and that's why they do it. It doesn't require necessarily some kind of elaborate conspiracy theory which locates particular individuals or groups as being responsible for these policies and these practices. So it seems like there's a sense in which what's termed a conspiracy theory substitutes for a critical analysis. And I was struck by the fact that, as you also note in the article, many of the people who came out onto the streets, possibly for very good reasons, were politically naive and were, in that sense, I would regard as being often politically illiterate. So there's a question of literacy, I think, in terms of people's understanding of basic political and social processes. But that can only be addressed, I think, through long-term education, both by public agencies, but I guess it's a function of the general culture. So what are the opportunities for people to have rational discussions about a whole range of subjects outside of the media? And I think the problem there is that most, and political parties lament this constantly, is there's been a kind of hollowing out of social institutions, that, including political parties, that previously fulfilled that role. And what's being presented is this thing called the internet, on which you'll find all kinds of information and actors, and it's very difficult for people to navigate those spaces. So there's a whole range of structural factors, I think, that help to account for why people might be not only interested in but committed to particular ideas. The reasons for that seem to be the function of long-term structural decline or change. So there's no, as you say, there's no magic bullet, but I also think of the people who've described themselves as partisans of conspiracy theories, who have at some stage come to the conclusion that what they've been led to believe is wrong. And so what do those people do? So there are, I'm sure you're aware, various people who've begun to speak out about that, who are, in a sense, like ex-cultists or something, who want to speak from a position of experience, of having been there, of having done that, and therefore they're in a better able to gain insight into an understanding of others in the same situation and to assist them in working through those issues. I see that as being somewhat parallel to the role of the former Nazis. Mostly this is in the context of, I guess, skinhead culture or bonehead culture, who've been through that mill, who've come out the other end and have disavowed those politics and have committed themselves to assisting others to exit those sorts of groups. But that's quite a particular example. The problem seems to be a more general kind of problem. But I just think if, it's persistence, I think, as well. I mean, there's, as you say, that the other weakness, I suppose, is very often the worldview is in some respects quite incoherent. So if you can bring people to that understanding where they can kind of equip them with ideas and ways of thinking that put them in a position that they're better able to navigate all this mess. But again, that's a long-term kind of project, and I think very often part of the response is informed by trauma, whether it's losing a job or something else. And so there's a range of, I guess, approaches that could be adopted, and one probably isn't going to be the magic bullet, but various attempts at creating greater transparency in public institutions, providing forums for people to have sensible discussions about these things that aren't dominated by Facebook, which has no interest in, inculcating or creating an informed public. In fact, a disinformed public is a more vulnerable one from which you can exploit.
Yes, and an angry, upset public is what you want, an indignant public.
Yeah, and I think also, there's also being able to concede that there may be some of those, many of those concerns are entirely legitimate. It's the explanatory framework that's imposed upon what's going on that's completely wrong and leading people in unhealthy directions. But in that context, Kaz, I also wanted to ask you said very often, from your perspective and that of others, conspiracy theories, given their history and their nature, often conceal, whether expertly or poorly, a certain degree of, or certain sentiment which is anti-Semitic. And I'm wondering, it's now been about 5 years since this movement emerged and then, in a sense, imploded. People have gone in various different directions, but it does seem to be the case that anti-Semitism, insofar as it was present, has been recognised, and now there's various other more determined political actors who are wanting to make use of it. So I'm wondering if you'd be able to talk a bit about how conspiracy theories is connected to anti-Semitism and the far-right groups in Australia and elsewhere who are taking advantage of that and attempting to promote in accord with their own ideology.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right, Andy, that what these naive political actors lack is a structural analysis. So they don't have an analysis of politics, of geopolitics, of economics. And sometimes journalists would say to me, well, what do I think about conspiracies? And I say, well, I do believe in a global conspiracy. I just call it capitalism. And for me, the capitalist, I don't go, oh, that must be the Jew, which is what the conspiracy theorists sort of end up with. I just go, it's corporations. It's not necessarily personal, although, of course, we see the oligarchs and so on and so forth. So for me, it's a matter of stripping out, I think, where we're at now, which is a cult of personality, that it becomes about individual actors. This individual actor is doing this thing. And unfortunately, we see that at the moment in the US with the activities of Elon Musk. This is it in its sort of purest form of the powerful, rich individual actor imposing their will illegally on a democracy and just acting illegally with impunity at this point. We've seen that with Trump as well. So I think that in the current age of celebrity that we live in, people often reduce it back down to they can't see the structural factors, they can't see economic history, they can't see political history or global relationships, geo-global relationships. So they reduce everything down to personalities, like it's kind of some kind of, I don't know, Kardashian kind of world that we're living. And of course, we see Trump and Elon Musk reinforcing that exact same view, whereas we know the power of structure and structures and organizations in wielding power and creating the world of what's possible and what's not possible. So what I see is so many people reiterating Nazi talking points, and they don't even know that they're Nazi talking points. And when you say, hey, you're talking like a Nazi, oh, you just call everybody a Nazi. Well, you haven't said Hitler's the greatest man alive, but you've pretty well reiterated every single point that the Nazis are saying. And I think that's really, really dangerous because people say, oh, no, I'm a libertarian. I believe in free speech. And then off they go parroting Thomas Sowell's Nazi talking points, without any awareness, the historical context of what he's saying, the deeper resonance of what he's saying, or the understanding that these are long-standing tropes of anti-Semitism, such as the whole blood libel thing, or Jews, they're just out to get your children. I mean, that really came to the fore in COVID. So I think it's very disturbing when people are just trotting out Nazi talking points and they're not saying, yeah, I'm a Hitler soldier, because, oh, no, I don't support Hitler. But, well, you might as well just be in Tom Sowell's club because that's exactly the sort of stuff that he says. And, of course, since October 7, this whole thing has just gone absolutely feral. So it's an extremely distressing situation where somebody with a watermelon in their profile pic is called anti-Semitic. Meanwhile, Nazis are marching around the place and nobody's really taking them, seems to me, that seriously as anti-Semitic. So I find the whole situation very distressing. But when I talk to conspiracy type people, I try to say, yeah, but it's not the individual wealthy person here and there, although now with Elon Musk, it is the individual wealthy person, but it's actually a structure that shapes our world that we need to be looking at. So getting away from that cult of personality is difficult as we go more into the American cult of personality. So for me, the anti-Semitism is extremely distressing, where I'm committed to analysing and exposing and undermining the neo-Nazi effort in Australia. But because of what I think about Israel's actions, I could be called anti-Semitic. Like, this just does my head in. Like, how can you be dedicating many of your retirement hours to smashing Nazis and then be called anti-Semitic because you support Palestine? So I think the way that Zionism is operating in our country and in our culture and in our politics is absolutely awful. And we're just seeing some terrible outcomes from that. And I feel sick in the way that I did in kind of about 2018 and 19. And that was when, of course, the Christchurch massacre happened in 2019. And I feel ill about politics in the same way that I felt then, a deep sense of foreboding that there's going to be some kind of mass casualty, that someone's going to drive a car through some Muslim school gates to kill a bunch of Muslim kids, that there's going to be something awful happening. I really feel that the tension that we've got going on in Australia is getting to a breaking point.
Kaz, we're just about out of time, but we couldn't have you on the radio without getting an update on our old friend Steve Bannon. And
yes.
Maybe even a little update on Miles Guo. I don't think I've heard much about him lately. What are Steve and Miles up to? Where's the new Himalaya Foundation or whatever it is?
Yes, look, unfortunately, we haven't seen any new songs from Miles Guo and the new Himalaya Foundation. I think Steve Bannon's been on my mind greatly, not just because he did a Hitler salute at CPAC the other week, but because he must be absolutely delighted. His wish list when he took over Breitbart, he's got everything on his wish list. He wanted a culture war, he got a culture war. He wanted to destroy media and trust in the media, the legacy media. He's done that successfully. Over these last 10 or 15 years, right-wing media has developed a very strong and robust ecosystem. It's very powerful. So tick for Steve Bannon, can cross that off his list. Yes, managed to create a different media climate where legacy media isn't leading and people are getting very influenced by right-wing media. So tick, he's done that. He wanted to destroy the binary between the Republicans and the Democrats. Tick, done that. Look at Trump. Is he a Republican? Really? What qualities or values does he hold that are consistent with the Republican Party? None whatsoever. He's basically just Trump for Trump's sake. Smashed that, the binary system, managed to achieve that, did a culture war. So we have a situation now where they're defunding heaps of research grants. So you've written your grant about mint plants and the spread of mint plants and the diversity of the species of mint plants. Oh no, you've lost your funding because you used the word diversity. DNA methylation, yes, we're going to employ a female assistant to increase the number of women in STEM, science, technology, and so on. Oh no, you've lost your grant because it's too woke. So he must be happy. The culture war's raging. The political system's in chaos. The media is low trust in legacy media. They're all Steve Bannon's wish list. And, of course, decoupling from China, tick, that's achieved with America. Decoupling from Europe, tick, that's being achieved as well. So he must be absolutely delighted. It's like, wow, my to-do list. It's taken a few years, but I managed to get through it all. Done a good job. Where that leaves us geopolitically is in a bad state. China's rubbing its hands with glee with America getting alienated from Europe. Perfect for them, perfect for Russia. They're all very happy. Less American influence. So, yeah, Steve Bannon must be on an absolute high.
He flooded the zone and now we've got to wade through it.
He's flooded the zone and we're all drowning. And he must be higher than Elon Musk on ketamine. I mean, he's on a natural high. Had his vision, he's achieved his vision. So that's Steve Bannon. Haven't seen any happy, cheery songs from him, just happy, cheery Hitler salutes.
Kaz, thanks for coming on the show. If people want to find you, you're still slogging it away on x.com, the everything app?
Yes, look, I have gone to the Blue Place, but only to look at like puppy and cat videos, really.
Oh, if you want to find Kaz online, at Tassie Kaz on Twitter, of all places. Well, yes. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.
The war on Palestine has not stopped. Palestinians need self-determination. Gaza must be free of Israeli occupation forces, have unconditional access to aid and reconstruction. 17 years of Israeli siege must end.
The West Bank needs the violence and attacks by the Israeli army and settlers to stop, and an end to the occupation and apartheid.
Your support to end the war on Gaza, to bring peace, justice and freedom to all of Palestine is needed more than ever.
Join the rally on Sunday the 23rd of March, 12 noon, outside the State Library on Swanson Street.
With Netanyahu and Trump threatening to ethnically cleanse Gaza and annex the West Bank, we all need to stand up and say no.
Rally, Sunday the 23rd of March, midday at the State Library.
With your support, Palestine will be free, from the river to the sea.
Free Palestine Melbourne is a 3CR supporter.
Double Trouble Blues Session is celebrating International Women's Day with a Women's Blues Festival on Labor Day, March the 10th at the Perseverance Hotel in Fitzroy from 3 p.m. Featuring headline acts Hussy Hicks and Minnie Marks, plus Calliope and the Blues Messengers, Stella Anning and special guests, culminating in an all-in super jam. Group, GA and VIP tickets from $30 to $65 via Oztix. Women's Blues Festival, March the 10th at the Perseverance Hotel, presented by Double Trouble Blues Sessions, a 3CR supporter.